Let's start with a baseline of what PARCC is. So early on, when the Common Core was first adopted, the U.S. Department of Education took a pot of money, $350,000, and divided it between two different testing consortia, Smarter Balance and PARCC. They didn't want to just give it to one. So the two, but those two consortia are not in competition. They're working together, they share whatever they can. The biggest difference is that Smarter Balance is adaptive testing, whereas PARCC is not. But both tests use computer-enhanced items, include direct writing, which is not something that has been common, and many states didn't want to pay for it anymore. So this is a big piece of the puzzle. Taking these Common Core aligned tests is a requirement under No Child Left Behind. But you could also, a state could have their own test that was college and career readiness aligned, 3rd through 8th grade, and once in high school. So that's what has to be in order to meet the No Child Left Behind guidelines. Now, one of the things that I think you want to understand about both PARCC and Smarter Balance is that they are intended to reflect not only the letter of the standards, but also the instructional shifts to reflect the changes that the Common Core intends. So, for example, the Common Core talks about evidence-based reading and writing. So what does that mean? That means you will never see PARCC ask students a question to write about, like, pretend you're a rain rabbitt. You know, those kind of imaginative stories. Or write about a time you overcame an obstacle, like a personal narrative. No, even narrative has to be based on evidence. So what might this look like, or what are the samples we've seen? Students read a story, like a part of a story, and then have to write based on what you just read, what do you think would happen next? Or a prequel. Again, now think about that kind of writing, how easy that would be to make part of just normal instruction. You have kids read something, now write about what first turn and talk to a partner, talk about what you think is going to happen next. We don't need to turn preparation for PARCC into more and more test prep, to fund a whole test prep industry. Rather, what we want to do is have students do this kind of writing all the time. Another possible way of having evidence-based narratives is to give students, for example, 12 facts about a real person. Eleanor Roosevelt, Jackie Robinson, Cesar Chavez, and then have them write a historical piece, a day in the life of this person. Interestingly, that's what many writers do, many picture books. Kat Munoz-Ryan's written this beautiful book about Eleanor and Amelia Earhart's day out, when Amelia Earhart took Eleanor Roosevelt on an airplane ride in Washington, D.C. And in her author's note at the end, she talks about, well, it didn't really happen the way I told it in this story. In fact, there were Eastern Airlines pilots on it. But everything about this story came from their diaries, real-life evidence, the ship log. So I guess the case I'm trying to make here is that PARCC is designed to reflect good student work, good classroom practice, and to think about what that means. It also means a different kind of questioning, evidence-based about what students are reading. So what does this mean for kindergarten and first grade children? Every time you read something to them, or they read something and you ask them a question, then you ask, so how did you know that? Tell me more. Let me give you an example. So this is I have fun. I love literature. So this is Halfway Down by A.A. Milne. Halfway down the stairs is a stair where I sit. There isn't any other stair quite like it. I'm not at the bottom, I'm not at the top. So this is the stair where I always stop. Halfway up the stairs isn't up. and isn't down. It isn't in the nursery, it isn't in the town. And all sorts of funny thoughts run around my head. It isn't really anywhere. It's somewhere else instead. So let's say you're talking to first grade students and you've read that poem and you've talked about it and you've watched the video with, there's a Kermit the Frog reading of that poem. And then asking students, where on the stairs does the child like to sit? How do you know? Always, so that it becomes automatic that you ask students to go back to the text. Now this is interesting because I was very worried when I heard about that kind of question. I was worried for double jeopardy. So if a kid gets the first answer wrong, I'm just going to say, what's the main idea? Yeah. But PARCC did cognitive labs during these field testing, so they're behind a one-way mirror, or they're watching kids take it. And what they found was that students who got the answer wrong, like about what is the main idea, I'm just using that as an example, went to look for evidence that they couldn't find, and so went back and changed the answer to the right answer. And for me, that was I was reassured that actually that kind of question helps students rethink. Go back. Your first response isn't always necessarily the only response. So in terms of practice, in terms of what we need to be doing with students, is always asking them to support whatever they're going to say about a character. Do you think he's nice? Show me the lines. Let's go back and reread. Because the most important reading strategy of all, the one everybody in this room uses every day of our lives, is rereading. But it doesn't have a cool graphic organizer or a cool acronym, KWL, BYOB, So what happens? We forget to use, it doesn't count. No, we have kids who think rereading is cheating. No. Rereading is there's the first thing you do when you're having trouble with the text. So again, we just need to kind of try to make that normal. Make that what you do. Now again, here's the problem. I think I said this to at this table that Common Core is a really good book that's being turned into a terrible movie. And one of the ways it's being turned into a terrible movie is implementation. Like, people are telling teachers to do really dumb things with text and with kids that feels mean. And so that's why I believe that there's in the Chicago Public CPS Teachers Union resolution against the Common Core, there's a bullet point against close reading. Like, what? But I'm sure the person that made that appear has been told to do something that they really object to. So first of all, close reading is not a strategy. Close reading is not marking up a book. Close reading is what you do when things are hard, when there is a reason to reread. When I'm going through the shopping through a grocery store line, flipping through magazines, keeping up with the Kardashians, I am not doing a close reading. But when I'm reading a text that's challenging me, I'm going to go back and look again. And again, that's what teachers need to do. That's what K-1-2 teachers need to do. You have a book, and you know where you think kids are going to stub their toes. And so you purposely choose that point. It's not about reading every book 3 times. That's, again, is part of the dumb stuff that now everything has to be read 3 times. Ridiculous. No. I know you don't want me to talk about high school, but really, who's going to read Crime and Punishment 3 times? No. But there are places in any text where you need to make sure. Let's say there's a shift in a text. The other instructional shift that the PARCC test is going to reflect that is huge is that 50% of the text that students will be asked to read will be informational on the test. So there's no question about that. And this is an enormous shift. Nell Duke has done research on what things are in first grade classrooms. First grade students are spending on average 2.5 minutes a day reading informational text. And only 10% of the books in classroom libraries are nonfiction. And most of those, dinosaurs and baby animals. There is more to nonfiction than dinosaurs and baby animals. For example, this is an amazing book. If you lived here, I want us to think about this too. First of all, I want to suggest how we got there with no nonfiction. The teaching profession is 85% female. And I know this is a gender stereotype, but most women like fiction. My bedside table, novel, poetry, novel. My husband's history, magazine, history, biography. Those husbands are in our classrooms right now. And given their druthers, they'd rather read about real stuff. And it's not that teachers are doing a bad thing. They've been giving kids what they loved, but I believe that this shift to including more nonfiction has the potential to engage a whole lot, many more little boys who find stories and princesses and blah, blah, blah. It just doesn't float their boat. But what we as teachers, we know how to teach stories. We know how to read it with voices and the rest. Informational texts work differently. So for example, this is a book about every double-page spread is a different house in a different place in the world. But the text is template-driven. So for each one of these beautiful illustrations, it's a house type, materials, location, date, fascinating fact. You don't necessarily read a book like this from page 1 to page 30. Maybe you flip through it and this interests you, you read that, and then you close it. That's not how a story, you have to read from front to back, otherwise the story doesn't make sense. And so again, we're talking about some real changes in our approach to it. We are living in a time, a remarkable time of children's nonfiction. So this year's Caldecott winner, this book is called Locomotive. Like they're multi-genre texts. So the inside of the story is about a little boy and girl who go on one of the first transcontinental railroad trips. But look at this. The end pages. The front end pages is entirely historical, with a map talking about how Lincoln commissioned this transcontinental railroad, how it worked. The back is actually engineering and all the parts of a locomotive, how it works. You could spend, a little boy will spend an hour on this page alone. And we need to rethink how we ask students to read a text, what it means to read a text for information, how to do a close reading of images, of rich text, rich visual images. Let me show you to this. So this is an exemplar text on Appendix B, and it's called Bat Loves the Night. And so it starts out with just like factual, nonfiction, informational. Bats are the only animals that can really fly, and flight has made them very successful. There are more than 900 species living in almost every habitat from subarctic tundra to tropical rainforests and deserts. Birds may rule the air by day, but bats are the monarchs of the night. Then you actually start the book. So that's just facts about bats. Listen, so you've got nonfiction there. Now, this is literary nonfiction. Bat is waking, upside down as usual, hanging by her toenails. Her beady eyes open, her pixie ears twitch. She shakes her thistledown fur. She unfurls her wings made of skin so fine the finger bones inside show through. So you have all of the literary elements that we've been teaching students: metaphor, simile, figurative language, personification, all those fabulous things that fictional texts do. We have it in a book that kids just who are interested in bats and finding out more and more things. Now, I think we want to, again, in K2, really embrace the language building capacity of reading aloud to students. So as students are acquiring the ability to read for themselves, at the very same time, we need to be reading to them books like this. No way do kids know what unfurled means. Doesn't matter. How are they ever going to learn? So let's think about this. The spoken language is made up of about 4,000 words. To read, you need 1 million. You're never going to get from 4,000 to 1 million by lists. You get to it by reading. And again, not just by cramming down kids, learn this word, learn this word. No, by multiple meanings of that word. Linguists tell us to have the full and flexible understanding of a word, you need to meet it 7 times. That's a lot of reading. That's meaning unfurled in a lot of different contexts. How is it that, let's say, and it's not just big, we're not talking about multisyllabic words. Think of the word apt, A-P-T. Everybody in this room knows it, and I'm not sure I've ever said that word in conversation except in this example. You know it. They don't even use that on NPR. You know what? You don't. Their most academic language only appears on the pages of beautiful literature, rich nonfiction text, and so we need to be feeding students, even as we're teaching them how to read, with books they can decode that are, controlled vocabulary and all the things that we know they need. We're going to be feeding them 19th century poetry, Paul Revere's Ride, Hiawatha, whatever. That introduce them to words, because we can't inoculate students against ever meeting a word they don't know. Instead, what we want to do is help students know what to do when they meet a word you don't know. And part of that is looking at context, looking at the word parts. In fact, what most of you do when you meet a word you don't know is you turn to somebody and ask. I mean, nobody looks it up, by the way. Nobody uses dictionaries. So in this regard, reading on e-readers may be a help. There's early research done by Linda Gambrell and her graduate students that, you know how you rarely have control groups in educational research, but they actually had 2 4th grade classes, both reading the same book, one on e-readers, one hard copy with a dictionary next to it, and they had some significant better scores for those who read it on the e-reader, and they think it's just because it was so easy, not just to press the word and find out what it means, but it gives you the right definition, whereas the dictionary gives you all kinds of definitions. So dictionaries don't help you that much in many ways. This is that third instructional shift that you're going to see on the PARCC exam, that the texts are going to be complex. They're going to be difficult. They're going to challenge students. Speaking of Common Core influence, you know that all the readability formulas up the ante. So books, let's say a Lexile score that was in the past appropriate for 4th and 5th grade, now is 2nd and 3rd grade. And they didn't do this to be mean to kids. They did it, or teachers. They did it because to read for college and career, you need a 1300 Lexile score. And so in order to get there, you've got to start earlier. By the way, career, the highest Lexile level text anywhere in CPS are in your career tech classrooms, because so much specialized vocabulary. And that's what sends the Lexile way just through the roof. It's curiously why a lot of dinosaur books have high Lexile levels. It's just all the dinosaur names. There are weird anomalies with Lexile. And so what can we do? How can we help our children on that PARCC assessment? Not by more test prep, but by great first instruction. By not wasting 1 second of instructional time. By treating every moment in the classroom as an opportunity for learning. And again, it's not that, I didn't say teaching. In some ways, we're doing too much teaching, and the kids aren't doing enough reading and writing. Like I'm teaching to the stand Common Core. Nobody's behind me, but boy, I'm doing my job. That's not, that ain't it. And so I just would like to read you this. This is a new book by Jacqueline Woodson. This is The Rope, a story from the Great Migration. And I love it very much because it also echoes the wonderful Isabel Wilkerson book, A Warmth of Other Suns, that was Chicago's Citywide Reads book. This is the rope my grandmother found beneath an old tree a long time ago back home in South Carolina. This is the rope my grandmother skipped under the shade of a sweet-smelling pine. This is the rope my grandfather used to tie the few things they owned to the top of the car that drove my grandmother, who was a mother now, from South Carolina all the long way to a place called New York City. This is the rope my grandmother used to dry the sweet-smelling flowers she grew in the small window boxes, reminding her of the flowers back home, where the land, she said, went on and on. This is the rope my grandfather strung so that my mama's diapers could blow dry in the hot city breeze. And this is the rope my mama tied round a small ducky's neck, then pulled it along, singing quack, quack, quack. This is the rope my mama held out to the girls on the block in her new Brooklyn block, the home of their own that they finally owned. Mama asked Charlie, anybody want to play? This is the rope my mama first tripped on as she sang with her friends. Miss Lucy had a baby. She named him Tiny Tin. This is the rope my mama's brothers took from her room for some crazy game little boys play. This is the rope my mama found again 10 years later when my grandfather said, we need a bit of rope to tie these things down inside this here car like that rope we used to have from back home. Then he drove with my mama off to a college far away from the city while up at the window my grandmother waved. This is the rope my mama placed on the piano around family photos, and me just a baby and then bigger already reaching for it. This is the rope my daddy used when he showed me the way to tie a sailor's knot. 2 times round and pull it real tight. You want whatever you make or do in your life, my daddy said, to last. This is the rope my mama turned as she waved to my daddy and taught me to sing the Miss Lucy song out on our sidewalk right here in Brooklyn just last Friday night. This is the rope we held up the sign saying we are all family at our picnic reunion in the big park up the street from our home. This is the rope, threadbare and graying, that I traded with Grandma for a brand new one. Then I jumped a new jump. My name is Beatrice, I come from Brooklyn. As my family smiled proudly and the sun began setting, as Grandma held on to her rope from back home and her long ago memory of sweet-smelling pine. We want to make books like this part of kids' lives so that they develop not just the ability to read, but a penchant for reading, a love of reading. And it's not going to be easy. Everything in society is working against us. But I believe that, like, we're, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. That we hold that flame, and that society so needs these children, again, not just to do well on the park, but honestly, I think college and career readiness, that's just the first step. I want to prepare students for life. And what does life mean? Life means you're going to have some hard times. And maybe books and literature and poetry is what's going to help you through that time. So with that, let's open it up to questions, conversation, and more talk. What are you wondering?
Are you familiar with great books?
Yes.
So what's your analysis of great books as a...
Fantastic. That for me, a Socratic seminar is the ideal model, what I'd love to see happening in kindergarten. So kids can't read yet, but we're going to look at the pictures. Let's say this is a story about the Galapagos Islands with pictures that can really teach students a lot. We're going to do a seminar simply on a visual image. Yes, it's the best. And they have been challenging, they've been giving really young kids really hard text for a long time. And the problem is we typically reserve that Great Books program for our gifted kids. We need to take all the stuff we're doing for gifted kids and give it to all kids.
there a list of sort of like Caldecott or Newbery Award winners for nonfiction?
Yes, and it's called Orbis Pictus Awards. ORB. Why they didn't call it nonfiction for children, but anyway. Orbis Pictus is the first children's book. ORBIS PICTUS. And it's an award sponsored by NCTE and the International Reading Association. And it's for great children's nonfiction. I also always go to the National Science Teachers Association. They put out a list of trade books for K-12 and the National Organization for Social Studies Teachers. And they're annotated, they have the picture of on the cover, just great books. And why I feel it's very important with the National Science Teachers Association. Like, I don't have the expertise to judge is the science in this book any good. So I trust that it goes through the professional organization that it is.
1,300 Lexile for high school, right?
For exiting.
For the exactly. So how do we get there from our primary grades with Lexiles, pretty low?
I think it's easier. Your question is easier starting in primary grades than if you had asked me, how do we get there starting in 6th grade? So if we start in primary grades, and as we teach, students are beginning to read, and we right away move them into chapter books that actually do challenge them. We don't keep them too long in simple, easy reading. Like yes, first of all, kids need 2 kinds of books. They need the grade level book that's on the grade level Lexile, and then they need a book of their own choice. You'd say lots and lots of choice for your own pleasure reading, free reading, that's much easier. But that kids deserve a book at their grade level, even if you have to do a lot of scaffolding for it. Because that's what we haven't done. That's how we got so far behind. All these kids are 2 years behind. Yes, but often their reading is 2 years behind, but intellectually, they need more challenges. That's how they decide school is stupid and then stop working altogether. Again, a lot of this stuff is easier to say than to do, like getting kids to do homework. But I mean, again, we need them to stop making homework busy work. Stop making homework worksheets. Homework is reading or writing. That's what your homework should be. And we need to shift the balance so it's not about taking points off you when you don't do your homework. I want to make what happens in class so wonderful that you're going to feel so left out that you're going to make that up because you want to participate in that conversation.
Carol, I have a pretty good handle on what the Common Core is asking. I'm more concerned about some of the technical aspects of PARCC, and so, like, for example, keyboarding.
Okay.
And so, we're talking about, writing being something that's required, I'm assuming, 3 to 8. And so, like, just students being able to coherently, put together a piece.
And this question is coming up all across the country. There are kids who don't know how to keyboard. What isn't that going to hold them back? Yes, but we need to get kids to keyboard. And how do you learn to keyboard? You need lots more keyboards in the classroom, not just for when you go off to take the PARCC test, but every single day. Kids also don't need to touch type to be really good at keyboarding with 4 fingers looking at the screen. I think it also helps to remind ourselves how every child in America learned to text without any direct instruction. Do you have tutoring and texting on Saturdays at your school? No. So kids are smart, and if they want to learn, they can. What we were talking about here is here's where the keyboard is posing challenges. There are a lot of kids who think you have to caps lock for every capital letter, and then you uncaps lock. They can't find the question mark. We need kids on keyboards really early, really often, all the time. And again, it's not to practice keyboarding; it's to write. So you're inviting students to produce something that matters to them. And, a Mother's Day card. but we're going to do it on a keyboard. Other technical things like that you're worried about. Yeah.
I had asked before, and I don't remember the answer, but it was in Illinois. Actually, how many times are they going to have to sit down in front of a computer to take a test? Is it 3 or 2?
Okay, so if you look at the old material, the materials that's on the website, and they talk about formative assessments and all that, don't worry about that. That's
Okay.
not going to happen, really. But PARCC has 2 parts. So the one that takes place after 75% of the school year, that's the writing tasks, the performance assessment tasks. It's asked students from 3rd through 8th grade to write 3 essays, all of which are based on readings.
And they're going to be typing or writing? Because we're
Typing.
having a debate about I've heard somewhere that there's going to be a paper pencil version.
But you can't. A teacher or school. It's a district has to apply to the state, and the states are only going to grant it if you're in rural place that there's no bandwidth. They're not going to give it out because you don't have enough computers, unless you. I mean, who knows in the end what they'll grant? But it's like a 2 to 3 year reprieve that both PARCC and Smarter Balance are going to have paper and pencil versions of the test, but it's not going to be easy to get that option.
What's the rationale for 75% of the year gone by? That's what I'm getting.
Because they need to have human beings read the papers. Because the idea is after 90% of the school year, you're going to take essentially a 60-item reading comprehension test, really, is what it comes down to, which can be scored by, instantaneously. And then that score will be matched with the reading scores for a total score that ideally, not in this first year, but ideally you will have it back before the end of the school year. Because they want, if schools, districts, et cetera, would choose to, you could use that score as part of your report card, as part of your end of the year report to parents. That was one of the kind of foundational ideas of it, that they'd have. One of the criticisms of all tests in the past, by the time you get results, those kids are gone.
Right.
So here, it's before right away. But that means that's why they had to test the writing earlier. So they could say.
And the 3 essays are the 3 types of writing?
Informational writing, opinion writing, and narrative writing. And the informational writing is that research simulation task.
And that's where they have to toggle between different research screens. Yeah. That's what I've heard about that.
Yeah. But
Is
kids
it
didn't have as
already
much
being
trouble as I thought they would.
Like using a fake internet.
Yes.
Okay. They
Yeah.
do fake internet search on like a controlled.
It's totally controlled. They give you the internet page.
Okay.
No, they can't send kids just out to the wild blue yonder.
No.
So then there's
Right.
2 questions, specifically in the idea of kinder. With the half-day program, a lot of teachers are concerned about the instructional shifts required and time available. So if you could talk a little bit about how a teacher can best model a half-day program with all the shifts they have to make for both ELA and math. And then also talk about, if you could, how to get kinders writing at the level that we need them to be writing at when they come in learning how to hold a pencil.
First of all, it's really, really hard. One of the things that we said at that table is part of the problem is that many kindergarten teachers didn't feel they went into teaching kindergarten to do this work. But kindergarten is indeed the new first grade. And so we might start with drawing, but moving that toward a word, moving that toward, the best you can make of a sentence, and helping students just to accept. What we want to do is accelerate their progress toward literacy, and it is going to be the case that it's going to be developmentally inappropriate for some kids, but that's also going to be an excuse that you hear used, because in suburban districts, in kindergarten, even in half-day kindergartens, now out in North Park, no, they don't. they don't believe any of their kids that it would be developmentally inappropriate. How is that? Well, it's just a norm. And by the way, they're tearing their hair out only having half day too. But here's something to think about. That you hear about opinion writing. So is that really developmentally appropriate for K1-2 students to write opinions? Wait a minute. Does anybody in this room have a 5-year-old who wants a puppy? Can that child not marshal ethos, logos, and pathos, and plenty of evidence to explain why they need a puppy? So what I think is our challenge is the teachers don't have the pedagogical prowess to teach opinion writing and gathering evidence in their practice, and that's what we need to figure out. We were having a conversation, the same thing about videos that are part of the free text that students are asked to conjure with for this performance assessment task. None of us have any practice in the classroom with how do you teach that. I mean, we've shown videos before, but not 3-minute clips that are essentially informational and helping students cite from that. Even you don't have any instructional materials out there that do that yet. So there's a lot of learning to be done. Yeah.
So I want to ask about the connection between vocabulary development, which you talked a little bit about, and summer learning loss. So we know there's years and years of research that shows how much learning loss there is during the summer, especially among low-income kids, but some to a certain extent, especially in math, among middle class and wealthy kids. So, I just want to hear your perspective about like the simple solution of shrinking the 11-week summer to something like 4 weeks.
You know what?
Would that have an effect on? Because we're seeing the number one way to conquer the achievement gap is to address summer learning loss.
Los Angeles Unified had to go on year-round, and so essentially it had only like 4-week breaks. And the rest, it was families hated it. Families absolutely refused. They put all the pressure in the world on the school district to come up with the money and build more schools to do that. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think.
Well, that's for a different. That was a response to a different problem, right? It wasn't a response to summer learning loss. It was a response to a lack of buildings, too many kids.
But the teachers, yeah. So that was the cause of it. But you had a condition where you could have had a reconceived school year. I don't think the public is willing to reconceive the school year based on what I saw happen there. What I think so I don't think that will happen. But what I think we absolutely need to do is to institutionalize summer reading. To work with any kind of Parks and Recs group, with Chicago Public Libraries, anything. I can't believe there are schools that still don't have summer reading programs. So we need to send books home with kids. We need to bring kids together. Just whatever. We got schools full of books all summer. What's wrong with this picture? Why don't we just send them home with kids? There are just a lot of things that because kids aren't practicing. Why do they lose their math? Of course, because they stopped doing practice. But reading should be easy if we could build this habit of doing it. It's also possible when we get to one-on-one programs that we actually send those devices home with kids over the summer. Why not? And then they could communicate with each other also, because you have to make things reading social for children. Kids don't come to school for an education. They come to school to be with their friends. And so anything that we can do that can make reading and comprehension and writing and thinking about to focus on the communicative aspects of that and the love of just talking and putting our heads together. I got the signal that we have time for one more question.
So we're going to get through taking the test. Tell us what we should do about looking at the data or what our process should be afterwards.
Everybody's going to do terrible. Just the score, just the worst. I heard Mike Cohen from Achieve, who managed the PARCC project, talking to governors, saying, guys, we're 3 years out. you want to be reelected, you need to go out there right now and start talking to parent groups. But it'll be a whole new measure, so it can't really be compared too easily. It's going to be a total shock and states that have backed away from PARCC, Georgia did, let's say Indiana did, they're still going to have really high level tests. What we're losing as states fall out of PARCC and Smarter Balance, we're losing that comparability across states. Oh well, but what you're not. It's not as though these other tests are going to do something else and be easier. They're still going to be. Will have the same test specs as what PARCC and Smarter Balance has. This, in the words of the great Spanish poet Antonio Machado, we make the road by walking. There is no magic program, magic bullet, magic expert who can tell us how to do this. We professionals giving up a night of your life like this, albeit to eat well, we're going to make this road by walking.